All right, friends, from all around the entire universe, this is yet another
sagacious episode of V8 Radio, Kevin.
A what?
Sagacious. It's a.
Okay, if we're going to be using big words, I should just get out of here right now.
I might need to leave too. Sagacious sounds like some kind of a cyst or something.
Not at all. It's a 17th century Latin word, Kevin, meaning having or showing keen mental discernment and good judgment.
Oh, so that's not this show at
Everything we are. Not.
Right, exactly. Well, welcome to V8 Radio. I'm your host, Kevin Oeste, joined, as always, by our 17th century esteemed co-host, Mr. Mike Clarke. And today, we have yet another very, very special guest, our good friend, Mr. Nick Scavo. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're always welcome. And to those people who to listen to this show, doesn't matter what hemisphere you're in, we start off every V8 Radio episode with some sort of automotive trivia question, kind of, I guess. And we use these as a little bit of a teaser, so people listen to the question in the beginning of the show. We don't tell the answer until the end. So that's our big bait and switch, to make people listen to this because, we're assuming that they haven't figured out the fast forward button yet. And I'm sticking to that. So, Nick, you are our guest today, so we'll have you go first. Did you prepare a trivia question? And I hope you didn't ask our friend Eric.
Oh, no. Nobody told me there was homework. Oh, my God.
It's not my fault. The dog ate it. I got hit by a truck.
There was locusts. An old friend came in from out of town.
Okay. No, I the only thing I thought of was what year did the 409 first come out in a Chevrolet?
What year did the first 409 come out? That's a tricky one.
That's a good one.
Because I'm a giver, I'm going to let Mike take the first stab.
You are the nicest person in the world, Kev.
Aren't I?
Oh, totally. Remind me to thank you proper next time I see you. All right. First year that the 409 came out in a Chevrolet, I'm going to take a stab at this and say 1961.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, right. Do you have I'll add a bonus. Do you have a car in mind that might have come out of?
The Bel Air. Chevy Bel Air.
61. All right, I will note this down. Mike says 1961 Bel Air. Nice.
Thank you.
I don't have my laptop open, so I can't verify if that's true.
Well, you're not supposed to because
not yet.
We don't cheat on our end. So
no.
Yeah, I'm just pacing back and forth as I'm walking through the kitchen.
That's right. And it's not cheating, it's interpreting, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, that's a whole theory on Nick Scavo.
That's right. So this is another rare occasion where I'm going to agree with Mr. Clarke and say it was also 1961. And I'm going to say it was in the Impala Super Sport.
Ooh, nice.
I know it was
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Dear V8 Radio listeners, we interrupt this episode because it was at this point of the program that Nick Scavo red-lighted and prematurely gave the answer to his own trivia question. We feel this goes against our stalwart principles and would rob you, our loyal listeners, of the V8 Radio experience you've come to rely on. We now return you to our program already in progress.
Well, hold on.
Whoa, cowboy.
We got to hold that answer to the end of the show, my friend.
Oh,
got to keep people hanging on here. How do you think people stay
yeah.
listening to this garbage?
We might have to edit that.
You'll have to edit that whole section out there where I explain how they could have made $1 million just by investing in one thing.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. So, okay. So, next question's on the table. Mr. Q-Ball, did you prepare a question for our guest?
I did, as a matter of fact. And
did you author it yourself this time, or was this
well?
provided by
I'm gonna qualify this question. It was inspired by our good friend Yardley. It's my question, but and there's a few steps of how I got to it, but it's definitely my question.
Okay.
Okay, Kevin. So speaking of Impalas, can you tell me and Nick? Can you tell us? Can you name all the different chassis platforms that the Chevrolet Impala was built on?
And because I'm a giver, I'm going to allow Nick, our guest,
Just
to go
a
first.
given, a given, and given.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so when you say platforms, are you saying like the letters?
Yes.
Like a B body. I got to be honest with you, that's one I don't know. So I can tell you what years they were, but I couldn't tell you the number. I never followed that for some reason. I only know 65 and 6 Impalas. That's what I raced.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, you got to take a guess.
Take a wild, hairy guess.
G body would be Malibu, right? F body would be. I'm gonna go. God, I don't know this one, but I'm gonna just say B body, but I don't know that. I really don't.
All right. So Nick says B body. All right. Duly
You can tell
noted.
I'm not cheating, because if I was cheating, I would be typing right now. I'd be
Oh
like,
yeah, you'd be rattling off words like crazy.
Yeah.
All right, Kevin. Question to you.
Okay, so I know that the Impala came out in 1958. So there was basically only one car platform in 1958, right?
I
There's
don't know.
only one size Chevrolet, right?
Beats me.
So I think the Chevrolet A-body platform actually started back in the 30s. We always think of it as the 60s, like Chevelle style.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say that in the 50s, it might have been on the A platform from, say, 58, 9. And then I know the B-body deal came in the mid-60s. And the A-body changed in 64, so I think maybe 58 to 64, which is one Impala generation, as I deduce. I'm going to call that the A, and then I'm going to say it went to the B-body, and then the later versions, I think, were an E-body, right? Is it a C or
Don't
an
look
E?
at me.
Like,
I don't know.
Like in the 90s? I think that might have still been a B-body.
Yeah, but that's not an Impala.
No,
No,
no
you're right.
collaboration on
That would
answers.
be, we would call that a
Gentlemen.
police car. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah, it's a turtle, is what it is.
That one that looked like a turned over bathtub, that's not an Impala. No, I'm just teasing.
It's a bubble.
I love the bathtub Impalas.
Yeah. So I'm going to say two platforms just to get this nonsense over with. I'm
Okay.
going to say it was an A body and a B body at some point.
A body and a B body, Kevin says. All right, very good.
All right.
That has
Last
been duly
one.
noted.
Duly noted.
Mm-hmm.
All right. My question to both of you guys, and it's a softball, but Mr. Scavo, and you'll get to go first. The NHRA, National Hot Rod Association, is a drag racing organization, and they give out a trophy at their national meets and at the end of the year. Who's the trophy named after?
Wally Parks.
Nick says, I don't think you knew that one, judging by how it came out. And the bonus, who was Wally Parks? Or who was your guess, I should say? Seeing that they named
Well, I
a
don't know
trophy
what they
for
would.
this guy.
I don't know how they referred to him as. Right? Was he considered the president? I don't even know what it was back in the day.
I cannot answer
know.
that. I don't even know if this
I
is
would
right.
I would say the originator of the NHRA.
Okay.
One of the first guys. He had cheese.
He had head cheese.
Head cheese. I
Hey,
think
which
there's
is
a
different
cream
than
you can
from
put
under.
on that.
It is different.
It is different from under. Okay. Duly noted.
Mike, you asked for this.
Dang
This is
it.
what happens. This is
I
it.
know, it always does.
Oh, it's
All
just
right,
descending
Mikey,
into chaos.
Do you want to take a guess on who the trophy is named after?
I will take a guess, and I'm going to agree with Nick, and it is the Wally Parks trophy. And Wally Parks, I don't know if he founded the NHRA, but he certainly was a huge force in the NHRA as far as safety and modernizing it and legitimizing it. But yeah, I don't know what exactly his title would be. He was the head cheese.
Yeah,
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Duly noted. And
Very good.
to our esteemed handful of listeners around the planet Earth, you're going to have to wait till the end, our friends, to find out what all this truly means. So today we are joined by our friend Mr. Nick Scavo. Nick and I go way back. Nick is a guy who's been doing it for real on the street, on the track, in his garage. He's America's favorite appliance repairman, next to Gordon Jump, and favorite drag racer as well. So Nick, welcome to the show. What have you been up to these days?
Working on appliances, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is a strange time for you because we're all still, as we record this, in the COVID's thing, and you legitimately, for your day job, you go into people's homes. I mean, how's that going?
I do, but I look like I'm a surgeon when I walk in the houses now. I'm wearing the N95 mask and gloves, and yeah, you got to walk in the house looking like you're ready for surgery.
Well, you kind of do anyway. I mean, when you repair something, I mean, it's on. There's no monkey business.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So,
well,
I mean, it's been weird, I got to tell you, though, because people are freaked out about letting you in their house. You know what I mean? They're
thinking, that's not new for you either.
No, but I mean, in all honesty, though, nowadays they're actually there's people. I mean, I have people who send their kids and their wives out of the house, and okay, I'll let you in the house now, and you're thinking,
wow.
I don't know, I don't know.
It's a thing for sure.
It definitely has gotten in the way of me actually making a living. I can tell you that.
Yeah, well, you're not the only one. So
no doubt.
Yeah, hopefully you can persist. Now, earlier today, when we had kind of our little chat, you were on your way to somewhere far more fascinating. What was your adventure today?
I stopped by Fast Times Motorworks just to visit a little bit, and they happened to be dynoing an engine while I was there, so I just stopped by just to kind of hang out.
Yeah, right on. So for those who don't know the Fast Times, kind of history and legacy and where they're at today, you've been kind of loosely and very involved with Fast Times over the years. Give us the nickel history on Fast Times and when you started kind of getting involved with those guys and what you're doing.
Okay, so in I would say the 70s, believe it or not, 1970s, I went to a place to have an engine built I had a 57 Chevy when I was 16 years old, and I wanted to put a blown alcohol big block Chevy in it, believe it or not.
Yeah,
so
I
do believe it.
Big surprise.
So I go to a place that a guy from a magazine, Doug Marion was his name. He had said I would send him letters and say, because I was a nerd, I was your typical car guy, you know what I mean? And I would send him letters, and he would send me letters or respond back, and he had said to me, he goes, you've got a really good engine place by you to build engines. You're lucky. And I didn't know who it was. And he goes, what's Engines by Gary Brown? And he goes, they build some of the best engines in the country, back in the day. And so I said, I'm going to get my motor built by this guy at Engines by Gary Brown. Well, then I come later on to find out that Engines by Gary Brown was owned by Ed Ciccone. Ed Ciccone built Tony Christian's World Championship cars. Like when Rear Morrison set records with a World Championship demodified production car, if I remember correctly, Tony Christian bought that car, took the engine out of it. Ed Ciccone built an engine and re-broke all the records.
Oh, wow.
And then they actually accused him of modifying the engine that was already in the car. And Ed said, that motor's not even in the car. You guys have no idea. He goes, I never even took it apart. I don't want to find out what somebody else does. I want to find out what I want to do.
Yeah.
So anyways, I'm a 16-year-old kid, and I bring a 454 Chevy to Engines by Gary Brown, and I come walk in with all the pieces. And I told him I wanted to build a blown alcohol big block. And he looked at me, and I was 16 years old, and Ed said, okay, well, first of all, are you serious? And I'm looking at him going, yeah, I'm really serious.
Was this like the money question? Like,
No, like, are you really serious? You think you're going to put a blown alcohol big block in a car and drive it on the street?
Sure, right.
And I go, yeah, that's what I want. He goes, okay, well, let's start by, see that crankshaft there? That's called a cast iron crankshaft. He goes, throw that in the garbage. And he goes, you're gonna get a forged crank. You're gonna buy these 7/16 rods back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So he told me what pieces I needed. And on the way out of the shop, it was me and my dad walking together. I took the 454 cast iron crankshaft and I threw it in the dumpster.
Nice.
And on the way out of the shop, I did 3/8 connecting rods. I threw those away because I had the motor completely disassembled when I brought all the pieces to him. And then I just started accumulating pieces. And before you know it, I had a 454 Chevy that Ed built. And my friend Eric Van Berkham from Precision Performance back in the day. He's still my friend to this day. He's my longest friend, believe it or not.
He's not that long.
Well, if you lay him down, he's about 5'8". But anyways,
Eric is one of our longest friends too.
He ported the heads, and he got me a set of aluminum D ports, and that was the motor that I had. And somehow my black Impala got in the middle of that, where I wound up building a 65 Impala. Mm-hmm. And the gist of this whole story is I street raced against Chuck Samuel, or my cousin Chuck was actually driving the car, but it was the motor that I did and I built the nitrous system for. And we street raced against Chuck Samuel out of Superdog, and that's how I met Chuck Samuel. And Chuck Samuel then worked with Jeff DiAugustino at Fast Times Motorworks. Making a long story really long, that's how Fast Times got in, and that's where my motors were all built from that day on. Every motor, we did everything together there.
So at what point did Gary Brown become Fast Times?
So Gary Brown was technically, from the story I get, he was technically an electrician. And he owned Fast Times. I'm sorry, he owned Engines by Gary Brown. But he didn't want to deal with people. He didn't want to deal with the public of it. It was Ed Ciccone who was able to do that better. And actually, Ed really is probably one of the smartest guys I know to this day. I mean, he's forgotten more than, really, he's so smart. And even though it was Gary Brown's name on the wall, it was Ed Ciccone who was really running the show.
Yeah, that's cool.
And another long story, even longer, is Jeff DiAugustino, who owns Fast Times, or owned Fast Times. His wife is Debbie Ciccone, which is Ed Ciccone's daughter. So apparently, we don't really go more farther than a couple blocks to marry people. We like to stay really close.
Yeah, well, you go with what you know. So it becomes Fast Times. Jeff ends up. Did Jeff work there? And
so Jeff worked there when he was 15 years old, and back in the day, they didn't even have a Sun and CK10 is a machine that automatically strokes when it's boring a cylinder block, or I should say when it's honing, right? Well, back in the day, Jeff was a little powerhouse, so he would put them on a bucket. He would actually stand on a bucket. The block would be sitting on its side, and Jeff would manually hone blocks back in the days with a drill.
Wow.
Seriously, all the blocks were honed manually back in from the early days before he finally got the CK10. And you got to understand, CK10 was a big deal back then, just like the flow bench. Fast Times' flow bench, and I should say, Engines by Gary Brown's flow bench and Bob Glidden's flow bench came the same day to each of the shops.
Oh wow!
So, these are shops that were like history. Like you didn't. When Ed is still one of the smartest men I know. I mean, he really is.
Yeah. Well, and this stuff's all very fascinating to me because over the years, I've gotten bits and pieces of this story, but I never really got, kind of the whole chronology. And at that point, obviously a few years later, but Fast Times is known to be one of the first with the cool toys. I mean, didn't their Superflow dyno have like some crazy low serial number on it?
No, that I don't really know the details on the Superflow. It was probably the Flow Bench that was the super. That might be the Flow Bench story.
Okay.
Because I could have swore that might have been Bob Glidden's and theirs were like early Superflows, early dyno Flow Benches, and then they went to the bigger one after that. They had the small one, and then they had the one that flowed more CFN as his cylinder heads got bigger and bigger. You know what I mean? But
right, yeah. Too cool. So, Jeff starts building engines, kind of, growing up in the shop to a certain degree.
Yep.
And you end up transitioning from doing the majority of, street performance, if you will, to use a euphemism, to maybe getting involved with some organized stuff. I'm guessing early on, like some of the weekend shootouts, and then eventually like NMCA.
It was there was Chuck Samuel used to make fun of me and call my garage the unfinished car museum. And
I
I
thought
had
that's
a
what
bunch
my
of
garage was called.
right? I mean, and it was funny. In one summer, I finished all the cars because you just get sick and tired of getting teased. So before you know, it, I knocked everything out. Well, so Chuck was saying we've got to get stop this street racing baloney. He goes, they're actually going to start having stuff at events. Let's try to get your Impala to run at an event. So Flowmaster had a shootout in Michigan. I remember this, and let me back up. The year before, there was a guy out there named Randy Lambert who had a yellow '67 Impala, and I mean it was black at one time. It was such a cool car when it was black. I mean, yellow. I know he painted it yellow to get on more magazines because nobody puts a black car on a cover of a magazine, but I just love the car. And back in the day, though, that car would run 950s, 60s, and 70s, and that was really fast for a street car.
Especially a big fastback Impala, like a 67 like that.
Correct, yeah. Well, so at the end of the year, they stuck Kevin Lawrence in the car, who at the time probably weighed a $120. You know what I mean? He was light. And I think he went I'm going to say 930s or something with the car. Maybe 920s. He might have gone 920s. But it was like, and that was superhuman. So the next season in spring, they're going to have a Flowmaster shootout at Michigan. And over the winter, Chuck says to me, he goes, okay, if you want to do this, what do you want to do? I go, well, I mean, I want to, I'll build a motor for the Impala, but I mean, I want it to go low nines. And he looks at me and he goes, well, Randy's car only went 950s and my El Camino went 940s. And I go, when I say low nines, I mean 899.
Yeah.
and he looks at me. He goes, well, come on, Nick. What do you mean 899? I go, well, that's what I want. That's what I want to do. So we show up at the first race of the year at Michigan. I went 928. And at the end of that season, we're at Memphis, and that was 890. I ran 893, and that was it. Once I ran 893.
Wow.
It was, you got to remember, there was like back then, Super Street consisted of probably 100 cars in the field, and 64 cars would qualify. And
huge events.
Oh, it was so big. And when we were down to the final 8 cars, I'd say 5 of them were from Chicago. And I mean, everybody was a bad dude. I mean, I'm not going to say that the guys who weren't in the final 8 weren't, luck just goes certain ways. Every round somebody goes home. That's just the way racing is,
Right. And it was a pretty tight spread too.
Oh yeah. But when we got down to the final 8 cars, it was 5 of them were basically our friends, and I was the only big car. Everything else was a Camaro, Corvette, or a Firebird. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's funny when you see a Camaro next to an Impala, you realize the trunk, his bumper ends at the beginning of your trunk. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and that car, of course, was filled with all kinds of stuff too. To be able to do that, how many of those were Fast Times powered cars in those final rounds?
Final group?
Those days?
I don't think they were. Probably only three or four of them, maybe. The other guys were Scott Fulkerson's guys, like Dan Bills. Bob Hood was us. Bob Hood was with us. God, who else? Spiro was with us.
But to pull that lens back, so what you're telling me is, out of 100 cars, the three or four or 5 in the finals are all from the same engine shop. So I mean, that's definitely
that definitely says something.
Oh yeah, that was back in the day when they were knocking out a lot of motors at that shop. When Mark and Wea was working there, I don't know how many motors they finished. They completed a day. It was probably more than a motor a day that was getting sent out of the shop. It was every day motors were getting knocked out and sent out, and real motors, they weren't building motors, like street motors for nobody. They were powerful motors that were getting dynoed. You know what I mean? Like real stuff.
And competing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And along the way, Hot Rod Magazine started to pick up on this, and they had their fastest street car shootouts.
God, those
which
were fun. Yeah,
you played along in a bunch of those.
Yeah, that was when racing for me was fun, is because, I mean, I get that we were working and bleeding and crying and it was nuts, but God, those were fun days because everything was done with your 2 hands and your friends' hands. You know what I mean? It really, money helped, but money didn't make you. Nowadays, money helps more than it did then. I mean, money definitely helps now.
Well, I think a big thing is that today, obviously for technology and manufacturing capability, the average guy can get his hands on stuff that was, a fantasy for when you were doing this. There's just so much high-powered stuff trickling down. Obviously, you can look at a new Hellcat and the thing, runs 9s from the factory, basically. So that's not that exciting to today's generation. Yeah. But when you look at what you guys had to do with rudimentary, analog, cast iron parts to make these things run like that, it's a whole different universe. You guys had to innovate, every day.
I mean, I'll give you one little example. When I said we first met Chuck Samuel, you remember when I said we met him at Superdog, and Chuck Samuel was with his girlfriend at the time, who he's still married to, and Carolyn, and we're all at Superdog, and we're gonna his wife actually, Carolyn, walks up and says, "Hey, you want to run that car?" And my cousin Chuck's '69 Camaro's there, and I had done the nitro system on it and the cam, and I picked the cam out for it, and we go like, "Yeah, how much?" And so we're going to go race. We go race on Zenith Road in basically where ABT is, which is for people who aren't around here, ABT is a huge appliance store, getting back to appliances. And in that area, there used to be a road that it's basically right on Milwaukee Avenue. And we would actually street race right on Milwaukee Avenue. I mean, right there.
Yeah. So anyway, Milwaukee at that point it was 2 lanes either direction, right?
Yeah.
Up there, and trees on both sides, and they call it Zenith Road because the old Zenith Electronics headquarters is right there, the TV company.
Yep.
And at night, you've got just as much chance of driving through that as you do as driving through and hitting a deer.
Yeah. Well, wait. Well, we raced on Milwaukee there. Let me tell you why, though. Here's how much of a snake Chucky was back. Well, actually, both guys were named Chuck. It was my cousin Chuck versus Chuck Samuel. He brings us out to the blood bank where we race on Milwaukee. And I'm at the end with the money, and I could hear the cars coming down, I could hear them all coming down the road, and I realized they're coming by me, and then they're going, I'm sure they're going 130.
Yeah, easy.
And they fly by me dead next to each other. I mean, when I say next to each other, you couldn't tell. So at the end of the race, I come up, I go, "Who won?" My cousin Chuck goes, "I don't know." And I go, "What do you mean? You were in the car." He goes, "Nick, the motor was 500 RPM than it's ever been in its life in the lights." I look at Chuck Samuel. I go, "How long is this track?" And Chuck Samuel smiles at me. He goes, "Well, I figured you guys had a 513 gear in that car, so I brought you to a long track."
Yeah, well,
dirty
Chucky's
animal.
another one who's in the Smarty Club for sure.
Yeah. So that wasn't 1,320. That was around 1,400 feet. Yeah. So we're going with a 513 gear at 80 some hundred whatever RPM in the lights.
Wow.
Anyway. Yeah, and now the other part of that story was on the starting line, Chuck Samuel thinks he's going to take money away from these nobodies. So he puts on his helmet on the starting line, and my cousin Chuck looks over at him like, he goes, "This nerd's putting on a helmet."
A helmet, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like back in the day, we're all think we're John Milner in American Graffiti. You know what I mean?
Right on.
Helmets, no safety equipment. What are you talking about?
Exactly. So Chuck Samuel's next to it, looking over, thinking he's freaking my cousin Chuck out. My cousin Chuck got a stick in the Camaro, puts it in first gear. They're looking at the cross section there, lights. The lights are changing. Light turns green, and Chuck Samuel goes, all of a sudden I see a 69 Camaro fender 2 feet in the air driving through the intersection on a wheelie.
Wow.
And Chuck goes, he goes, "That's when I realized, God, I hope this track's long enough." Because Chuck legitimately caught him and passed him in the lights, and nobody could exchange money because you couldn't tell who won.
Wow.
Holy cow.
Yeah, that's great.
Those are fun days.
Those are great stories.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of them.
Oh, man.
For sure. So, kind of looping back to the initial part of this conversation. So, Fast Times then, Jeff ran it all the way up through the 2000s and kind of changed directions a little bit and got into the family business of Italian restaurants.
He did. So 2000 and I believe it was 4-ish. He said, "Listen, I got to finally start making money. This is crazy doing this, race car stuff." And the business turned into Graham's business, who Graham used to work for me, and Graham worked for Fast Times. Graham worked on my car, and then he worked for Spiro as the crew chief on Spiro Pappas' car when it went 380. Now think about this. They still talk about how fast 380s in the 8th is, and Spiro went 380s back in, like, I don't know, 2000, 2003, something like that. I mean, that's pretty fast.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, and Graham Jones needs to be pointed out, too, because Graham Jones was almost like the ultimate super fan. He just would drive from, Atlanta to go meet you guys at a race and just hang out?
So every race I went to, I would just say I'm going to be there, and he would show up. And he did that for legitimately 2 years. He just showed up at every race I needed him at. And then before you know it, he moved here and he lived in my house.
Yeah, that's right. And he couldn't.
And now now he's married with a beautiful little baby, and he is technically right now the owner of Fast Times. Although I don't know how it works because the equipment's still Jeff's, and I'm sure that there's some arrangement. That Graham's probably paying it down, but I think Graham is the boss. But what's really funny about this whole scenario is, come full circle, Jeff has now been back at Fast Times since the coronavirus hit. Jeff has been there every single day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
At Fast Times.
And that is so cool on several levels because, first of all, it's kind of putting the band back together in a crazy way. I think when Graham, envisioned getting into all this stuff, he wanted to work with you and Jeff. Anyway, I mean, that was kind of the draw, is to build race motors, but do it with some of the best. And then when Jeff split off and was doing the restaurants, the family restaurants are awesome. Jeff has two of them, and his cousins, they have a few others, and I've eaten at all of them, I think. And the pizza's the best, in my opinion. It's the benchmark. So when I heard Jeff was, going to be doing the pizza restaurants in Glenview, Illinois, there used to be a naval air base right there, and they I guess Bill Clinton closed the base, and then it became a housing area with condos and shopping, and that's where Jeff's first restaurant went in Glenview. And if you recall, I don't know if Mike knows this, but the very first episode of VATV, we watched it live from that restaurant.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Interesting trivia.
Yeah, damn, I should have saved that.
How about that? You wrecked it. You wrecked it.
So Jeff was gracious enough to let us host a little premiere party there, and we ate and drank and had a great time. And I think Jeff was feeling the pressure from his family, who are all very successful in the restaurant business, and quit getting your hands dirty, make pizzas instead of race engines. But today to hear, we always knew you go there all the time, in the before times, pre-coronavirus.
Yeah, but when we could sit next to each other and actually have a beer, right?
Right, and we'd all sit there and talk about all kinds of stuff, from these kind of remember when stories to following current pro stock to engine theory, and what if he did this, and you had some of those great minds that were behind that whole Chicago racing scene 20-30 years ago are still hanging out. And Jeff kind of comes to life in those conversations far more than when it's I have to make more food for people. So
it is true. I mean, and he has been in a better mood and in better spirits during this whole situation with his businesses doing terrible. I mean, you got to remember, nobody's allowed to go to a restaurant right now. Or a bar. It's terrible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for him to actually have a smile on his face today, he's honing a set of 440 Chrysler rods, and the pistons were over because everything just got done being balanced. And I looked over at the pistons, and I go, is that like for a diesel or something? And Jeff goes, yeah, they're big. I go, they put pistons that big in an engine? Like you ever see how big a Chrysler? Like, I'm used to touching lightweight, cool looking, you know what I mean? But when you look at a standard 440 piston, it's a big, heavy clunker. You know what I mean?
It's
big.
a sledgehammer. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Jeff was getting off on making everything perfect. He was licking the rod, like when I say licking, he's got the rods on the rod machine, making the bore of the rod perfect, and you could just see the care and the pride he was taking in doing that task, that little mundane task to him. And you know what's really funny? That's what makes people happy. Money does not make you happy. Satisfaction makes you happy, and when you do stuff like that and you have pride in it, I don't know, man. That's worth it, you know?
Oh, totally, totally. And I know, there's no doubt that he crafts the operations at the restaurant too. But when you were saying before that Gary Brown didn't necessarily like the customer aspect, that's stressful. It's a different skill set to deal with people all day long. Some people can do it, and some people it brings them stress. And I think Jeff is more of a guy who likes to be in control of the whole project. He's in control of that rod and that machine
Yep.
and that
Yep.
engine, and that brings him his inner peace. He doesn't have somebody that is calling up saying I can't make my shift, or just all the variables that you would deal with in a restaurant, customers and suppliers and all the rest of it, the menu.
Right.
So it's a far more relaxed environment for him. And it was funny the first time I came back from California and went to Fast Times when it was still in Glenview, I guess, or Morton Grove. Glenview, right? Morton Grove.
Glenview, yeah.
Glenview. And
Or wait, what do you mean? Did you say Fast Times or the
Fast
Casinos?
Times. Fast Times.
Fast Times, that was Morton Grove.
Yeah, right
that
on
was
the edge of
Lee,
Morton
yeah.
Grove.
Correct.
And that was the old building. I guess Spiro owned that building, Spiro Pappas, at some point. But it was not a state-of-the-art appearing facility. It was an old brick place, cinder block, and kind of a mess. And inside, the engine shop was clean and organized, but you really didn't know what to expect when you walked in the door, because it felt kind of like, this what's the best way to, it was kind of gritty, it wasn't like high polish with graphics all over the place and
Definitely not.
a receptionist and everything. You really had to know, you had to find it. First of all, you had to go down this road by the railroad tracks and in the back, and then you had to have a reason to be there. You couldn't just walk in and hang out.
Right.
And you'd go in there, but once you got inside and you see Jeff at work, I mean, you're almost hearing classical music playing in your head,
Yeah.
seeing this guy honing his craft. And that's what I think is so cool today, because Graham spent time there and ended up, working the arrangement to carry on the Fast Times name. And how cool it must be for him to be able to work with his mentor again, having accumulated a whole bunch of experience on his own. And like you're saying, working with Spiro and setting records and everything else. So he was trained properly, and no doubt developed his own style and system. But to have Jeff come back in and work together, I think that's probably pretty cool.
Well, but the thing that I think helps somebody out, anybody, working alone, really, that you could get crazy in your head by yourself. So I can work by myself because I'm in your house for an hour and then I'm gone. You know what I mean? But Graham was working at Fast Times now and for years by himself, 100%. And he would hire kids and fire them. You know what I mean? You just couldn't get people to work. So you almost make yourself crazy inside of your head. Well, now you've got somebody like Jeff there who, if you bounce an idea off of him, if you say, hey, what are your thoughts on if I were to change this? You've got somebody actually as smart or, smarter, giving you an option or a discussion or an argument back, which that helps you not go insane. You know what I mean?
Right. And it makes you grow.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. One thing I remember Graham saying that I thought was pretty fun was he said you could take 20 engine blocks, 20 freshly machined blocks, and line them up in a row, and Graham will be able to tell you which one Jeff DiAugustino machined.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he was crazy.
That's quite a talent.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So in those street engines, a street race engine, when I say street, we mean the same thing. It's a car that, like a super street car, 10.5-inch tire, not necessarily street legal, but kind of appears that way.
Sure.
What are some of the things, some of those care items that you got to do to kind of make these pieces fit together that your parts store machine shop, just doesn't do?
Well, okay. So, the truth is a quality machined engine just gives you an engine that's not going to come apart for a dumb reason. The stuff that we did, the stuff that the good racers did, was not destroy a perfectly good engine. You know what I mean? So, like, I'll give you an example. Back in the day when I was spraying the dog crap out of the Impala, I mean, I was spraying it like an idiot. Chuck Samuel is looking at the main caps. He's getting ready to just to lick the mains so that we could put it back together. And he's going, do you see this? And he's showing me the caps upside down and the block. And there was metal transfer between my main caps and the block. He goes, Nick, you got to take some timing out of this engine. He goes, the caps are moving back and forth so much that metal is sticking to each other and causing them. It's almost like it's like rub welding together. Okay. And that's because, I was going down the track with 28, 29 degrees of timing. And I was spraying it like a man. We were, and then you find out that wasn't the smartest way, but that was the way, just like when we used to leave the starting line, with 1,200 pounds of bottle pressure. Those things worked for me in the day, but truthfully, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't do it that way. But back in those days, man, when I would let that nitro system fly, that car would be on the back bumper driving out, so it looked good,
Right. Well, I think the phrase might be it worked because the engine stayed together to allow it to work.
That's possible. Yeah, I agree. We did learn. Things. There was a lot of little things back then that we learned, especially camshafts. Like our cams were different than a lot of other people's cams. And I'll give you an example. We were at a race, and I'm not going to name names, but a guy said to me, so what power did your motor make? And that was in my black Impala. And at the time, it made 810, He goes, well, my motor's a certain brand motor, and it made 850. I go, well, good. Then you'll be able to beat me really easy today.
Well, because that's all it takes, Well,
you made 800 and some horsepower, and I'm sitting there going, meanwhile, okay, you got 800 horsepower here, and we were spraying, we had a nitrous plates at the time, and I had I had 102 thousandths on the starting line of nitrous and 110 thousandths of nitrous on the second stage, and I'm going, that's another 400 horsepower I'm putting in the engine. So either you have 1,200 horsepower at the end of it, or you don't. And obviously, his 68 Camaro couldn't beat me because I won.
Right.
So,
well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the other fun part about racing is it doesn't matter what the equipment is if you can't get it down the track consistently and keep everything together. There's that. Yeah.
Well,
there was. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mike.
I think a big part of it also is that mental psych out, just like you were saying. Well, you should be able to beat me pretty easy then.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You think there was a little of that going on?
Yeah, and occupying some space in someone else's head, and then they screw up, and then boom, there you go.
Well, that's where my initials came from. When we were in a race in Orlando, and a racer from Canada was there. And he had said to me, I just like to be safe, good luck. I tell people I'm going to race them. I'm nobody's enemy. We're friends. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I go, be safe and good luck, He goes, and who are you again? And at the time, I remember I had a Coca-Cola, actual red can, sugar in it, Coca-Cola, which, by the way, I can't even imagine drinking a Coca-Cola right now. There's so much sugar in it. But anyways,
right.
I'm drinking it, and I tell him I'm the guy with that Impala next to you. He goes, oh, okay, yeah. He didn't even say, he didn't say congratulations or good luck back, nothing. I go, okay. And I'm walking away and going, really? Who am I? Really?
Who am I?
Who am I?
I'm Nick effing Scavo. That's who I am.
Now you know where my middle initial came from. My initials are NFS. I'm Nick effing Scavo, dude. I threw the can in the
You're
garbage.
about to find out.
Yeah. I remember we pulled up next to each other at Orlando. I let go of the trans brake. It was on a wheelie all the way through second gear. The car would not come down from the wheelie. I pulled it. It was a column shifted car, remember. I shifted in the second and it wouldn't come down. Finally, it starts settling down. I click third. I pull the chutes and I legitimately look into his lane. I go, that's who the I am. Oh, God.
Well, and what I love about those kind of stories is that it's okay if you can bring it.
Yeah.
It's not like
and
you
I don't
run
even
around.
mind, dude. I don't even mind losing. Like I said, every round one person goes home. Drag racing is 32, 16, 8, 4, 2. Every round, 50% of you goes home. That doesn't make you a dummy or a bad person. So in other words, when I've lost, I don't cry. You know what I mean? But
Mhm.
you don't need to be a jerk too. I never understood that. Like, I legitimately have helped more. I raced Bob Curran's car, the late Bob Curran. He had to go to his his high school reunion. So he goes, well, you built my Corvette. Why don't you just go drive it? So I go, well, okay. So I took it to the Hot Rod Magazine race in Memphis. And I go up to another racer, and we're there. And first of all, the guy was kind of frustrated that I was racing because I raced in a class above them. And I go, dude, what? It's just a car. You know, what are you talking about? So I go to him. I go, you know, your car's leaving. The way your car leaves, the suspension's weird in the back. And I go, you could tell by the way it's sitting. I go, if you just look at it, you see how your car's sitting. And I'm telling him, he goes, well, sure, you're going to tell me how to make my car run bad so that you can, you know, win.
Yeah, right.
And I looked at him, just to swear on my mother's grave, this is what I said. I go, Tony, I hope you run the best ET you ever ran. I hope you set the record, and I hope I send you home. And by the way, two rounds later, he went 8:52, set the record, and I sent him home because I treat him.
Nice.
Nice.
And I reset the mile per hour record 2 or 3 runs in a row in Bob's car, and I kept writing the mile per hour on his dashboard so he'd remember every time he drove it he has to beat that mile per hour record.
Nice. You know, it's good to have goals.
You could have goals.
Well, I mean, that's what I think is so cool about that sport is, you know, you can build a car and you can build an engine and everything else, but, you know, it really comes down to when the light turns green and who's through the lights first and who's fastest at the big end of the track. And, you know, it's kind of a short version. It's a 1,320 foot long version of how you look at life, you know, because every day you wake up and you're faced with challenges and everything else. But if you can focus on what you're doing and get good at it and learn from it and not be destroyed when things don't go well, you know, pretty soon you can get to the point where, you know, you can command kind of what's happening. And when you're up against somebody else and they give you a hard time and you've got the experience and the ability, the drive, and you know your machine and everything else, and yeah, you could look at them and say, sure, pal, whatever you want. I'll see you in 8.5 seconds. I hope you're there.
I mean, but think about how, I mean, if you can't understand how to lose, when we put the turbocharger in the 69 Camaro, and we were lost. And when I say lost, I mean I couldn't figure out what to do to save my life. We lost first round, I think, for a year straight. 1 year straight, I never went past first round. I mean, and we would just be driving home going, mind you, we had a stick, we had a turbocharger with a stick. And that was really, really hard to figure out. I had a hard time with it because as the counterweight would come in, it would add load. As load came in, if the turbo got happy. As the turbo got happy, it added power. It was a vicious circle of figuring out how to make the car not go nuts. And I just kept losing. And, you know, finally we put a Bruno in the car, and man, that helped everything, by the way. The Bruno solved all my problems. And with that car in 2003, then we wound up winning the championship. But in order to win the championship in 2003, we had to lose for a year straight in 2001. You know what I mean? So
and those were tough times because I remember, those were the days when I was covering the NMCA races for Hot Rod TV, and I'd see you, you know, every third or fourth weekend in a different city, and it's like, okay, you know, and you're kind of coming off that high of being a nitrous guy all those years and not only understanding how nitrous systems work, but innovating and coming up with ways to, you know, Mike, I don't know if you ever heard some of the stories of the nitrous hardware that Nick invented that eventually got purchased by companies that, you know, you can buy the stuff today.
Oh,
you know?
wow.
The double cross plate I invented. There's no ifs, ands, or buts because I was called in for a deposition on that plate when there was a patent infringement on it. So when they called me in, they said, so now we want you to you know, discuss this plate that you say you invented. I go, well, I'm not saying anything. I'm telling you to look at a magazine that was 2 years before your patent came out and take a look at where the nitrous lines are on that nitrous system that's on that Impala. And it was funny, that whole lawsuit got dropped.
Huh. Well, because you had enough proof, you know.
Yeah, and but the thing is, NOS had it after me, and I don't mind NOS having it because they did help me out through the years. So because NOS, but another company was a company claiming it was theirs, and that's what got me aggravated.
Okay.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
So you knew nitrous, but yeah, the turbo thing was a whole different deal. And at the time, you felt you needed to have it to be competitive because at that point, power adders are either nitrous or a supercharger or a
Right.
turbocharger.
Sure.
And each one of those was handled differently in the rule book. So
Okay.
the turbo cars, for whatever reason, were given a weight advantage over the other types of supercharged cars or nitrous cars. And they made so much more power. And, I think the weight break might have been kind of a bone because they were so unpredictable at that point. And, you didn't have the odds that everybody, you didn't have the consistency. So when you guys showed up with the turbo, and if I'm not mistaken, it was like a 400-inch big block, a small big block.
It was a 3 1/4 stroke, 402 cubic inch big block Chevy.
Yeah. And
I used to shift it. I used to shift at 9,200.
Gee whiz.
mind you, with a 5-speed. So it had a 5-speed stick in it. So picture first
dang.
gear, I'd be out. Yeah.
That's
why it was a handful. It was an animal. I mean,
Those are sport bike RPM numbers for Pete's sake.
it was crazy. It was.
My
How about the
gosh.
time I spun the tires with it? It spun the tires so bad that I got aggravated and I wouldn't lift. So when I get back to the trailer, Jeff looks at me and he goes, so you think you should have lifted at some point?
No.
I go, why? He points at the data log and the engine RPM was 10,280 RPM. And I looked at him, I go, well, if it ran out of power there, it should have stopped spinning the tires then.
it was still in it. Yeah.
Exactly. If it wasn't meant to be at that RPM, it should have ran out of power, and it didn't. So
That's right.
that's when we got so aggravated that once we realized that our whole problem was power management. It wasn't making power. We were making stupid power, but power management was the problem. And so the minute we stuck a Bruno in it with a torque converter, and at the time it was a PTC torque converter. And then we wound up going to Neil Chance's converter after that, and then a Pro Torque. But why weren't we stuck it in there? The car went down the track, and then after that, it went faster and faster. And before you know it, it picked up 2/10 with the turbo. And once 740s back in the day, when 740s was fast, nowadays it doesn't seem like it's that much, But 740s was fast back then.
Well, and people have to understand that 69 Camaro was a real 69 Camaro Z28 car, right?
Correct. VIN number and
boy.
everything. Yeah.
And it was a stock front suspension car.
Oh my
Correct.
goodness.
Correct. Yeah.
So this thing's going 740s at
190,
195?
194. Yeah, 194, right.
194 on stamped steel GM control arms, no tubular nothing. Obviously the full safety cage, steel GM doors with how many holes drilled in them and everything.
Okay, but wait a minute. Now I'll start telling you some tricks. So the rules were you had to have steel doors. I did. I had steel doors glued to fiberglass doors on the inside, and everything was all held together with aluminum pieces on the inside.
God
Nice.
dang it.
So if they checked the outside of my door, a magnet stuck to it. So technically, my car was legal.
Nice.
You know what I mean? But
That's the interpretation part of the whole thing.
Mhm.
I know. There we go. I'm a rule interpreter.
That's what you got to be.
Yeah.
So, you landed on a really key point, and that's learning how to lose. And I think that is sorely missing from a lot of our upbringing of people today. People are not taught how to lose. They're taught win, 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 win. And then when they don't score the winning basket or their team loses or they don't win the race or whatever, they're crushed. And I think it's far more important to teach somebody how to lose, to step back and pull the emotion out and say, okay, let's find out what happened. Let's look at the play. Let's look at the film, the video. Let's look at the race and try and figure out what happened so that never happens again. And that's what that whole season was.
Right.
Exactly. Analyzing the fight is the key. I mean, if you can't figure out how not to get punched, you know what I mean? You could be the best boxer in the world. If you get hit all the time, you're going to go down. You know what I mean? So you're going to have to figure out how to make sure, that you got to watch the tapes and see what everybody else is doing and figure out what you're doing wrong, because you're doing something wrong. You're getting hit.
Right. And you got to put that ego aside. You got to really say, okay, I recognize that I'm losing here and I got to figure it out. And I think, for me, I use a lot of analogies of the space program, the early Apollo and Gemini and and those programs, because that's what those guys did. They had no idea how to do what was tasked of them, and they failed over and over again, and they just had to sit back and say, okay, well, what happened and why, and let's fix this. And when you're sitting on, how much power do you think that Camaro was making at its peak?
Which one? The silver one?
The silver turbo car, yeah.
Turbo, probably 2,500, I guess. 2,500, I would imagine.
Yeah, and it weighed, what, 30, what does it weigh? 3,200 pounds? Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's hauling the mail. Ooh-wee.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the purple car was more aerodynamic, more powerful, and more out of control and faster than that one.
Yeah, that one 660s at 227, 176 the eighth. Basically on a wheelie. I mean, that car was fun. It's still sitting in the garage. It's 60 feet away from me right now.
Wow. So, here we are today. The last time you raced that, it's been a few years now, right?
We won the race.
Well, yeah.
we were lucky.
A champion.
That was a lucky weekend. We went to win that race.
Pulled a Michael Jordan and retired on top.
No. I mean, I was going to come out again this year. We were talking about bringing the car out to go to some of those, the no prep races, and then the coronavirus hit, and for all of it kind of changed everything because with Jeff at the restaurant, and although Jeff's at the machine shop now, so it's
This is where I'm going. This is where I'm going.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I know.
So now we got Jeff back at the machine shop, so he's thinking about it, and you got the car. The car's still sitting there. It's probably still current enough to be legal.
100%. Yeah.
And today we don't know when these events are going to start opening back up again. Things are getting rescheduled and pushed back a little bit. And kind of what I think for somebody in your shoes and in Jeff's shoes and anybody else who wants to play along, this is not a bad time to be in, because if you guys had a conversation and said, hey, you know what? We think there's going to be a race in July. Why not, for fun, go out and try to make that happen, knowing that, in July, that race might get pushed back to the middle of August. You might actually pick up a little bit of time as you're scrambling to get there. And it might be a good opportunity to do it. I say go for it.
I do too. You know what? I didn't have the opportunity to ever watch you race. I didn't grow up in this area, in the Chicagoland area. But I'll tell you what, if you brought that car out, I would go watch you race.
I would too. The problem is for us, it's back when we were younger, I would have 2 or 3 guys in my garage every night. Nowadays, like I said, Graham's got a little 1-year-old baby. Joey's got 3 kids that he was a main helper on my team. All of a sudden now everybody's a grown up, taking care of other people. And I mean, little people, like really little ones.
Sure.
And so for me I can't all of a sudden just say to guys, okay, that's it. We're putting the band back together. It's a little...
but the difference is, I think the desired outcome might be a little different. I'm not saying campaign this thing to go win the series.
Got it. Yeah, I agree.
And 2 things come into play. One, all of you guys are older and smarter now, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not scrambling around as much, bumping your head against the wall to kind of achieve this. And the other thing, like you were mentioning about Jeff getting back into the engine shop and finding that sense of enjoyment. If you guys took this thing out, once or twice this year, you guys would just enjoy the heck out of it. It would just be so much fun.
I suggested it, and the funny thing is, since the motor that's in my purple car was originally in Chuck's pickup truck back in, I think, 99, we could actually have shirts party like it's 1999. We could put on the front of the car the Over the Hill Gang on the front spoiler of the car. You know what I mean?
It would be a lot of fun for you. It would be an attraction for everybody else. Guys like Mike who didn't have the opportunity, or people, the thousands that did, if they knew that you guys were going to be out at the track. Like you're saying, some fun merchandising. Recently, by the way, I bought one of those Fast Times shirts that Graham had reprinted with all the the cars on it.
The 5 cars, yeah.
The 5 cars on it, yeah. So nostalgia's huge, and the music industry tanked when they were starting to sell digital downloads, 1 song at a time, and then the distributor took all the cash, and you saw all of your favorite artists hitting the road again. You see,
yeah.
the Rolling Stones are still touring, and you name it, they're all on the road except for the Corona thing. And in a strange kind of way, this is your opportunity to kind of do that same deal, and not have to be 75 or 80 years old. Isn't like Jim Croce or somebody doing a tour? He's 80 years old.
Oh my God. Really?
Yeah, and he needs the money. That's his problem. Is there was no more record sales, and for his lifestyle, he's got to pack stadiums. But in your case, I think that would just be so cool. So
I agree. I'd like to.
I'll send Jeff a text. It isn't going to do anything, but I'll send him a message.
Oh no, he's in. I'm the problem.
Oh, you're the problem.
Yeah, no, I'm the problem.
Yeah, go figure that out.
Yeah. It's just it's hard. The money aspect of it. We went through so much money as kids having the fun that we did, and the problem is I really was a washer and dryer repairman. So for people not to understand, these guys are here and they got this and they got that. No, all the stuff that I have is all my money. It's gone. It's all in that car. And now, luckily I got a wife in the healthcare field, so she could take care of me with health insurance. So
she
helps.
Can't. I was gonna say, she can't reach you right now, right? Otherwise, she'd be hitting you. If you were going to say, my wife can take care of me.
Oh yeah. Well.
But at the same time, again, the goals are a little bit different. You're not trying to make every race and travel to Florida and because that life was brutally hard for all you guys who had day jobs and working all day at the job and then working at night on the car and then all weekend, and you get home at 1 or 2 in the morning Sunday night or 10 Monday morning and have to get right back to it. I mean, I don't even know how you guys did it, but
it was silly. It really was. But we were young, that's what, I don't know how Graham did it. I think Graham Jones would drive all the way back to Atlanta if we'd be at a race, in Maryland. Yeah, it wasn't Michigan, Maryland, and he'd drive all the way home.
Yeah. Well, it's saying something. It's dedication that a lot of people, you just don't see that much anymore. But
I tell you, I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube. And there's these guys, like Cletus McFarland and all those guys who are on YouTube. They are 1 block away from Brainerd Racetrack. And I was saying to my wife the other night, I go, can you imagine back in the day if Fast Times was 1 block away from a drag strip?
Oh man.
I'd have been out of my mind. I mean, I would have been changing parts 10 hours a day. I'd have been trying, 4-link. Oh my God. We were at a race in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and we were changing 4-link settings, and I would make 2 runs with every setting. And I'm under the car changing 4-link, and then I'd go make 2 more runs, and then change the car, make 2 more runs. And at one point, I fainted under the car.
Oh, gee whiz.
I did. It was 100 and some degrees, and I'm working like a madman, and at one point, I remember I closed my eyes, and I remember waking up, looking around going, I wonder if anybody noticed that.
Yeah, right. Is this blood mine?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was crazy. But now if you had a track that was right there, right next to your shop, where you could put the car up on a lift or something, oh man, would we have fun doing that?
Yeah, because that shop was just far enough away from Union Grove to where that was just out of the realm of possible. About an hour away, and the track wasn't open all the time and everything else. But yeah, cool stuff. Well, listen, I think we got a couple things. I wanted to do a quick shout out before the show's over. Mike had talked about a 49 Olds the other day with a translucent hood that he had seen on Hot Rod Power Tour. Turns out a guy named Ken Mitchell knows the car, right?
Yeah. He reached out to us, and he knows the guy who owns it. A guy named Ron Williams actually owns that car, and Ken is friends with him.
Too cool.
Yeah, he's known the car for a long time. Yeah, really small world.
It's like was a plexiglass hood or something, like you could actually see through it.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a 49 Olds, and the dealers would get these. I think they were made out of Lexan or Pyrex, and they were there to display the brand new for 49 overhead valve engine that was brand new. That Oldsmobile and Cadillac came out in 49. And the old dealers got these see-through hoods, and they weren't meant to go with the car when the car sold, so they were pulled off the car, they were stored, and this guy, Ron Williams, knew of where this one was, and he was able to get it from a dealer and restore the car and put it on the car.
That's cool.
Oh, it's amazing.
And you saw the thing on Power Tour, and then the guy that knows the owner just happens to be a listener. So
Correct. Yeah.
That was why we wanted to give him a shout out. That was cool. Thanks, Ken, for bringing that up.
Also,
quick shout out to our friend Vinny Costa at Street Muscle Mag. Street Muscle, they had me on as a guest for their Rodcast, which I'm still not 100% sure why they wanted to hear my silly stories, and it was very kind of them to have me join. But they just published a video, What is Pro Touring, in which it goes back to that whole story that was Mike's trivia question of where did I think the term Pro Touring came from, and they verified it was truly Mark Stilo.
Yep.
And they have Jeff Smith's story about the logo and all that stuff. So I was not making that up.
No, I know you weren't.
But it was just interesting that the timing all came out at the same time. So shout out to Vinny Costa and Greg Acosta, who is the other guy at Street Muscle, actually at Engine Labs, and thanks to them for having me on. Another quick shout out. And before we let Nick go free to go get his act together and get the race car on the road,
You have work to do, Nick.
Yes, we have to answer our trivia questions before the natives get restless. So Nick, you had the first question, so we'll let you go first, revealing the correct answer.
About the 409.
Yes.
It came out in mid-season 61,
Ooh.
and even though everybody normally would answer 62, it was mid-season 61.
So we got lucky.
better be lucky than good. Better be lucky than good.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, Mike, what was yours?
All right, mine was, can you name all platforms, the chassis platforms that the Impala was built on? And Kevin said the A and B body, and Nick said the B body. Well, B is part of the correct answer. However, all the platforms are the B body, the W body, and the Epsilon 2 platform.
So
Well,
the
of course,
W was
yeah,
the X frame then?
No, the B body was 57 through 85, and then 94 through 96, or excuse me, 58 through 85, 94 through 96. Was all B body. W body 99 through 2014, with the 2014 to 2016 had the Impala Limited, and then the Epsilon 2, the latest Impala is the Epsilon 2 platform from 2014 till now.
How funny is it that we all thought the Impala was over by 96?
Yeah, right.
And in your case, long before that.
Yeah. A funny story, I used to sell Impalas at a Chevy dealer in 99. I remember when that new Impala came out, we were all giddy with excitement on it.
Wow, right
Really?
on.
Yeah.
Which is also the Caprice police car, all the way through the mid-2000s, the rear drive LS platform.
No, that W body was a front drive.
No, after that.
Oh.
Not a sister platform of the Impala, but
Okay.
the term Caprice was used on the Chevy version of the Pontiac G8.
Oh, right. Yes, that's correct.
And I think you could go to the Chevrolet dealer, and what was it? You could buy the Chevy SS.
Chevy SS, yeah.
And it really wasn't an animal. It was just an SS. It
Correct.
wasn't an Impala or anything. Yeah.
Right.
With a 6-liter or something in it.
Yeah.
But that's not that
It-
Australian car? That's not essentially the Australian...
It is.
It was.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what that was.
Yeah, the Holden is what is
Holden,
what it
thank you.
truly
Thank
was.
you. Right.
You bet.
They call those the bay body. All right, so I got that wrong. Nick and I got part of that one right.
Correct. Partial credit. Well done, boys.
Okay, and I threw you guys the easiest one. Who was the Wally Trophy named for? Nick, of course, said Wally Parks, the originator and head cheese of the NHRA.
Wait, guys, that's a technical term. That's a technical term.
And Mike also said Wally Parks, who was a huge force in legitimizing the NHRA, especially with safety. The head cheese.
Head cheese.
Yep.
Head cheese.
And you're both correct. Yeah, Wally was the guy that basically started the NHRA, was the president. But he was also editor of Hot Rod Magazine for many, many years.
He was.
Wow.
Yes. And I'm not really sure. I try to kind of pitch our trivia questions a little bit towards the guest. I figured Nick might know a little bit something about drag racing. So, that's...
Well, I thought Nick might know a little something about Impalas.
I don't know anything, dude. Are you kidding me? life I've relied on other people to make me look smart.
Yes. Well, see, what you don't know, the rule interpretation was probably in play again. You didn't hear him typing his laptop because that's against the rules, but you couldn't hear him texting Eric.
Yeah, if Eric were here right now, he would know the answers to all the questions.
Oh, I know.
Oh, for sure.
All right. Well, this was a lot of fun, man. Thanks for coming on, Nick. You're welcome. Absolutely, anytime
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You want to have story time, and we here at V8 Radio, we invite you to subscribe wherever you're listening to Apple Podcasts or Google Play or Stitcher or iHeartRadio. That's a good one. Mike, you spoke with our good friend Clarence today, you mentioned?
I did speak with Clarence today, yeah. We watched him on the Aftermarket Insider podcast with Joe Sebergandio and just talked to him a little bit today about his segment, and we talked about it for about a half hour. Super nice guy.
Clarence is great. Clarence is a previous guest. Clarence, Nick, is the current host of the Hot Rod Power Tour. He's the stage guy, and if you get a few minutes as you're doing your service calls and you dial back 2 episodes of V8 Radio, you can hear Clarence. And we invite everybody to check all those out. So we appreciate you listening. For Mr. Nick Scavo and Mikey Q-Ball Clarke, I'm Kevin Oeste, and V8 Radio reminding you to keep the shiny side up, and we will talk to you next time.